Afternoon, Bill.
Afternoon already, Mark, and this is our second podcast this morning. And what a great location we're in. We are sitting in the Urbis office in James Street in Geelong.
Off Little Mallet.
Off Little Mallet, which has become the food precinct of Geelong. And boy, have they done a good job with that.
And whose office are we in?
Urbis. And who are we meeting?
Nat Anson, who's the director. I'm looking at Nat there and he's nodding. Yep, Nat Anson, Director of Urbis in Geelong, and a very well-respected organisation. And we'll come back to what Urbis is and what they do. But welcome, Nat.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Bill. Good to be here.
So the question we always ask, Nat, is, and we try to ask, is where did you go to primary school?
I went to primary school at Warrnambool Primary School.
Another Warrnambool.
You've had one before?
Yes, yeah. Proud Warrnambool boy. So
you weren't off a dairy farm, were you?
No, I wasn't off a dairy farm. As my wife, who is a farm girl, reminds me, I'm a townie. Townie is the polite way I'd put it. There's another word for it, but yes, I'm a Warrnambool boy, so Warrnambool Primary School.
And what was your transition? So primary, where did you go to high school? Yep. Still in Warrnambool?
Yes, still. So not quite born and raised in Warrnambool, Portland born, but
good time.
Whole schooling in Southwest in Warrnambool, and then to Brower College, which was I think formerly Warrnambool Tech.
Okay.
So state school upbringing. Yeah. And
very
then
good.
And then flew the coop and left Warrnambool after year 12.
And while you were at year 12, what did you want to do? What were you thinking about where I'd like to be, what I'd like to... Or did you...
Look, my aspiration from an academic perspective was really probably guided by my brother, who's 2 years older. He was very academic and ended up at Ormond College at Melbourne University. I visited in year 11... quite bluntly, saw where he was living, the co-ed nature of the accommodation, and put it this way, highly motivated at that point in time to get to Melbourne Uni, but not particularly focused on the what of and it was just the where.
It wasn't Warrnambool, was it?
Look, I love Warrnambool, but it was one of those moments in time where I thought, wow, if I'd hit the books, I could do that too, and that's what happened.
So, as a kid growing up there, doing high school and all this, what were you the terror of the town? What interest did you have as a kid around Warrnambool?
Look, I was heavily focused on basketball, so I played representative basketball all the way through for the Warrnambool Seahawks. I did. Look, I was a pretty good kid, so to speak. Ended up school captain and all the rest of it. My parents call me the Scourge of Lake Patobe. That's an official nickname. So I think, look, I was a little bit the black sheep, but in all seriousness, we were very sort of pretty well-behaved kids, generally speaking. Yeah,
that's good.
So you got into Melbourne Uni?
Yes.
What were you doing?
I did a Bachelor of Science.
Science?
Very poorly. So the first year, you sort of, as you would expect, it's a bit of a fish out of water experience, paying from a state school in Warrnambool to going to the halls of Ormond College.
Yeah, but you learnt the names of all the local pubs. You would have done that.
Well, we had the Turf Club on Sunday, we had PAs on Monday, we had Clyde on Tuesday, we had, actually PAs was Wednesday, we had the Nortons on Monday.
That's right.
Turf Club on Thursday, and then you'd sort of sleep Friday and Saturday, or you'd have 18th or 19th or 20th or 21st birthday parties. But yeah, look, science, and they went through probably year 12 chemistry and maths and biology within the first week, and then the oh no moment for me. So fixated on getting to university, and having done science or STEM through year 11 and 12, but never really, I would say, had it been my strong suit. Now in the way that I do business is so much more probably humanities based. Would be the skill set to a degree, and found that out pretty quickly. I would say my parents would still reflect on my second year of university. Before starting the podcast, you talk about tipping points. I'd been tin-assed my whole life, and it was a reality check in terms of that.
Well,
change.
The tipping point was that reality moment, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. And where you go, I've failed probably very significantly for the first time in my life. And that was a good learning. It was a great lesson learned, because you realise, hey, I don't want to be doing this stuff. You were cutting up rats in a laboratory, and that's going to be the pathway for many people, and a good pathway to go. But it wasn't mine.
What's the choice?
That's right. Whilst you were studying, did you have outside jobs?
I did, yes.
And what was your first job?
The first job, so I was... my first job at high school was fantastic. I worked at the Village Cinema in Warrnambool, and I made popcorn and ripped tickets, and it paid about 5 times the amount of a Macca's job. It was $15.90 an hour in 1998 or 9,
yep.
which is outstanding. It's probably more than...
And all the movies you saw.
And all the movies. So I'm very averse to that 3-year block. During uni, during Ormond, I would not work throughout the course of the curriculum.
Yeah.
I'd go home after the day after my last exam and worked on the outdoor crew at council until basically the day before going back to Ormond in March. So 4 or 5 months, mostly on the council crew that looked after the foreshore, so all of the caravan parks. So it was really heavy labour.
Yeah.
Good respect for council, outdoor crew staff. People joke about things like smokos and all the rest of it. They work bloody hard.
Keep you fit.
And so great to be out in the sun, but long days. And it was one of those situations where it was a great job, good, and great people, very much
good.
enjoyable. And
So
it was beer money for the rest
you
of
went
the
to
year.
uni basically because your brother was there. But did you have any idea what your future might look like?
Not at all.
Yeah.
So so basically that tipping point to get out of the traditional science pathway, within science at Melbourne Uni, you could still, in science, be more focused on geography as a discipline. And those classes had an alignment to town planning or urban planning as a general principle. So I finished my bachelor degree. It was then a kind of what next moment that I thought was more education or studying either a master's or the equivalent. I grappled for a minute with a dip ed before my dad really, in no uncertain terms, said, that's not the right pathway.
Is your
for
dad
you.
a teacher?
No, dad's in local government.
Okay.
But mum's a teacher,
Yeah.
and I think he thought that was not a good way to go. And urban planning was really, to some degree, dad's suggestion, based on what I'd already been doing, and never looked back after that. So I started a Masters of Urban Planning at Melbourne Uni straight away.
Yep.
And that was it.
So your first urban planning role?
First urban planning role, I'm going to get accused of nepotism, was a student placement at Warrnambool City Council, again over summer periods between uni breaks. My jobs during uni were never career-based jobs. They worked at a surf shop, worked at Melbourne Uni gym, but that was the first job. And then my first real job, after about 9 months of travelling, backpacking through Europe, was a basically planner at the Growth Areas Authority, which is now the Victorian Planning Authority.
Oh, cool. Good start.
Yeah, it was. I think there were about 65 applicants. I have a feeling they chose me for the lack of experience as opposed to the depth of experience. There's a bit of a piece of clay to mould. But walked in the door there with Peter Seamer and quite a small crew at that point in time, and that was the start to my career. If you like.
And good learnings out of the VPA?
Loved it. I loved working in the state government. That phase was, the early parts of that greenfield new communities policy and planning landscape. So it was the agenda that had been put in front of the Growth Areas Authority and Peter at that time was transform that sector, cut through the local government barriers, cut through the barriers that were present in other departments to get supply on the ground. And he did that, and that's what the authority did. So it was a very exciting place to work. I think the mandate for the Growth Areas Authority at that time, and it translated into what then was the Metropolitan Planning Authority and then the Victorian Planning Authority, was quite an entrepreneurial office by comparison to a traditional government department.
Yeah.
So that we were encouraged to actively engage with the private sector and push projects through. So it was a really exciting place to be for a young planner, and because of the scale of the task, there was a real ability to be put in positions of authority that you might not otherwise get experience for. So, for want of a better description, Nat, there's your precinct structure plan to do. Go and do it. So you had a reasonable amount of autonomy as well.
That's cool.
As part of that.
And then Nat, you actually ended up in local government.
I did,
Didn't
yes.
you?
Yeah,
City of Greater Geelong?
To an extent. So what happened there was I was running a program called Streamlining for Growth for the VPA, which was a grant funding opportunity for local councils all across the state. And I think I got out into the region to meet in person with about 42 of the, 47 regional municipalities. A lot of vanilla slices and a lot of miles on the road, which was excellent, and fantastic people out there in local government that usually don't have the resources to do everything they want to do. So it was a great fund. Geelong was one of those stops on the way, and really what had happened was I'd done as many PSPs as I could in the VPA. I felt that I'd learnt everything I could learn in that regard. Council had initiated the Northern and Western Geelong Growth Areas project, but it was struggling. I just don't think that they'd found the right expertise or system to put in place to deliver upon it. They'd had a consultancy working on it, and what they did was essentially replace the consultancy with a single person. That opportunity came up, had my name written all over it. We'd already bought a house in Geelong and had intended to commute back to Melbourne, so it was perfect. It was perfect. Yeah. So I what was the order? I had less than a 2-week-old son, our first son, born. We'd already, with the intent to move to Geelong about 3 weeks after his birth, and I started in the week between that at council. So it was a busy time.
How long were you there for? 2.5
years. Yep. So from basically picking up the growth area framework plan to in terms of its early stages, and my last day was more or less coinciding with the last day of the planning panel to essentially move it on its way to approval.
So that project sort of wrapped up, and that...
Yeah, it was another one of those situations where you delivered it and delivered it to a milestone, and from that point on, I could have stayed with it. The conversation at that time had come up with Urbis several months prior. So what happened was effectively I made the decision to make that move, but then there was a period of about 4 months where we agreed between Urbis and council to keep me in my role at council, so to speak, to make sure it was guided to that next milestone.
We better stop there for a minute and go back now and explain to our listeners about Urbis.
Yes.
Who is Urbis and what do you do?
Good call.
Should I do that, or is that something you want to
do?
do?
No, you do.
That's all. You can script your own story here.
Yeah, so Urbis is a property advisory firm, multifaceted. It's a tier 1 firm. It is essentially the preeminent planning and property advisory firm nationally. So we have, I think, around, don't quote me, probably around 800 or thereabouts staff nationally. Main offices are 250 odd staff in both Melbourne and Sydney, near 200 in Brisbane. We have a Perth office, and then several regional offices: Gold Coast, Parramatta, Geelong.
The growth areas.
Those growth areas they're really exciting in that next tier, and then a Singapore office. So, really, in terms of the breadth of the sectors we're involved in and those projects, you name it. The biggest high-rises in Melbourne are ours. The largest public buildings, South Bank Master Plan in Brisbane. We're the lead consultant on the Brisbane Olympics and the legacy outcomes for the IOC, for instance. A lot of work in our Singapore office is the Middle East and some of those exciting projects that are happening there. So it's it's a dynamic company that really is across all sectors of the urban environment.
Yep.
If you were to take a block in central Geelong, it's cradle to grave. So you can identify the opportunity at the very outset with clients in terms of the property advisory and opportunity, all the way through the urban design, transport advisory, sustainability advisory, the permit application process itself to completion. So
talking about Geelong, of course, this is relevant to what you do because there's so much happening here now. We've gone from doing nothing to a point now where every time you pick up something about property, you'll see Urbis's name and you'll see Nat's ugly face attached to it. Or if you go to a property council meeting or anything to do with property, you're up front and centre. There's no doubt about that. In fact, you two I should referee between you two because Mark, you're on the Geelong Authority and Nat's representing companies that want to build more and more and more. So
it's good.
But so what's the biggest project in Geelong?
Biggest project in Geelong? Well, it depends on the sector. I can give you a taste of what we're up to at the moment. So from a greenfield standpoint, Stockland's one of our big clients in Armstrong Creek. They've got an estate there called Banksia that we're actively working on. If you look at infill, Balmoral Quay on Rippleside is a very substantial development. It is currently looking for its fifth stage to go from a 3-storey development outcome to a 7-storey development outcome. So, that relies on a lot of, if you like, strategic advisory, a burden of proof in terms of the benefits to the community. We've had high-rise in central Geelong recently. Moorabool by Mono is a perfect example of that, where you're getting substantial uplift in a central Geelong standpoint. GMHBA Stadium, we have done the landscaping for the new stand there, which is a great project. 12 Apostles Visitor Centre, Torquay Surf Club redevelopment, and so on and so forth. So, you name it, we're sort of in it. And, look, I couldn't agree more. What an exciting place to do business.
It sure is, yeah.
So to come back to the loop, so Urbis and you'd been chatting, you left the council, came to Urbis. They didn't have an office here then?
No. So
was that part of it? Was that
totally? So the aspiration for Urbis predates me. They had a pretty good in. My wife also works at Urbis, so she's been with the firm for about 14 years. So I was known to the business in a personal way, and Urbis felt to be successful in Geelong, you couldn't have a transplant that just comes down and starts an office. We've seen a little bit of that with other businesses that you might have a 2 or 3 day a week Melbourne person or staff member come down and try and perform that role. I don't agree that it's a successful way to do business. I think the way that we've set up, which is to find someone in the market with some prominence who is passionate about regional development legitimately, has been a really good way to do it. I think that to an extent is because you need to be present at all times in the market. You need to be growing a team of young local people that are also from regions.
So when you started, there were you and how many?
Two others.
2? How many now?
We've got about 10. Yeah. So look, the expansion is. We could continue to grow. I think regional offices, particularly if they're a satellite of a larger entity, there's probably a natural scale that's comfortable. Geelong, when it comes to planning and development, we're still a relatively immature market. So for a firm like ours, which is frankly reliant on larger scale opportunities, we're not going to do a 2-lot subdivision in Geelong West. Requires a pipeline of work, which requires the city to be fully embracing of transformational change in terms of the urban environment. So I think we're really on our way there. For us, it's not so much about the scale of our local staff expanding in terms of numbers. It's about our current staff having more and more Geelong projects to do.
I always talk about somewhere along the line, you've got to identify your sweet spot. Yeah, and that is determined by your clients, of course. That's the other issue. But if I was to, with everything that's planning and going on at the moment, and shovels in the ground, etc., if we're sitting here in 5 years' time, describe what you think Geelong will look like compared to today.
I think the biggest opportunity at the moment is Central Geelong. Our clients are sensitive to certainty. So they have money that can go anywhere. If you're a Geelong business person in property, you don't have to spend your money in Geelong to make a good business bet. You could theoretically do that anywhere. You could go to Southeast Queensland or New South Wales and do the same. So what Central Geelong Framework Plan has done is provide certainty to the market, and we're seeing clients that are recognising that. So there's a high amount of interest. When something comes to market, we will have many clients wanting to do due diligence on that piece of land and look at the opportunity. That wasn't the case when the framework plan hadn't been approved, and there was a lot of doubt about the status of Central Geelong.
Yeah.
And that was only 2.5 years ago, really.
That's right.
Now I look at another place that is really, from a highly local perspective, that suffered the opposite, Packington Street. When I started the office in 2020, Packington Street Urban Design Framework, the process was underway. It looks like it would be resolved.
You're talking about West?
Yeah, everything basically, the Gordon Avenue, Packington
Yes.
Street precinct all the way up to Church Street. That was a scenario where there was a high amount of interest at that time in 2020-21 because people, or the market thought that there'd be a resolution to that process. We don't receive queries about Packington Street now. Like, there's just too much uncertainty in that location. Now, if that was to be resolved and the controls were put into the planning scheme in the next year or so, and it's now known what you can do there with certainty, those inquiries come back. So I think in the next 5 years, Bill, to answer the question, Central Geelong and the revitalisation of Central Geelong should be the key focus. It's the one that I think is the most opportunity. And I think we really believe that residential in Central Geelong is the way to revitalise. So instead of relying on public sector investment, which is important, we want it, I want to see approvals for residential and get people in the streets.
Well, you and I just spoke before we started this about Newcastle, for instance, and all that residential development. My other question is the convention centre. It was always the long-term planning and the wish list and all the rest of it. But now the dirt's being moved. So 4 years, I think, the development to get it up and running. How do you think that'll change the dynamics of Geelong as a city, Central Geelong in particular?
We have the most outstanding bones for an urban centre you could possibly ever want. It is, I think everyone talks about it, it's probably the only north-facing CBD in Australia of any particular scale. So the opportunity in terms of the natural geographic location of Central Geelong is ideal. 1 hour from Melbourne, all the rest of it. So the convention centre will be an important piece. I think it's complementary to the knowledge and innovation hub that is Deakin University and what is now a very well-appointed Gordon TAFE campus. And then also the Arts and Culture Precinct. So I'd like to see the convention centre as one of the, I'd say, 5 or 6 institutional pieces from an arts and culture and if you like, creative industries perspective.
Well, it's a piece in the jigsaw puzzle,
I think,
isn't it?
But what I'd be saying to government is, a couple of things.
I'm sure you've already said it, by the way.
What I'd say there is, 2 things become apparent to me. I then look at the gallery redevelopment and the potential, say, of the state government building as building blocks in what would be a creative industries industry, as opposed to a couple of buildings that have an interrelationship to one another. The other thing I'd say there would be, and I've said it very recently, reinvest in Geelong in terms of that next pipeline of major infrastructure And to me, that has to be the Geelong Station and the Geelong Station forecourt. The sense of arrival at the moment, compared to then what you find 500 metres further afield at along Little Mellop Street, or what you'll see at the convention centre. So my position on that would be the convention centre can be excellent, but boy, there's some things to focus on once it's been delivered in the what's next category.
So, Bill, do you think Nat has a passion for what he does?
Oh, I sort of gathered that.
He's a bit subdued about it, isn't he?
And he's never afraid to voice his opinion.
And that's what's really good about it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to push his head too big because he won't get out the door. But he's very passionate about what he does, and particularly about Geelong, which is fantastic. The other thing that he does, and we haven't really touched on, but you're on the Property Council. Yes. So you're the chair of the
Property Council. Yep.
Regional Committee. UDIA?
I am no longer on the UDIA committee. I've handballed that to a very capable junior member of our team.
Okay. And G21?
I'm the chair of the Cultural and Economic Development pillar at G21.
Yeah. So Nat gets involved.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
You forgot probably my favourite one, which is Barwon Regional Partnership.
Of course, sorry.
With RDV. And I'm also on the Strategy and Policy Committee for the Committee for Geelong.
All right, so and you've got family?
I do.
Kids?
Yes.
How old?
6 and 3.
Well, guess what? All these other activities are going to slow down because they're getting into primary, or one's in primary, I think, and the other one's probably not there yet. And then your life changes, and it's called sport and activity and everything else.
Look, I think I agree, Bill. I think life is getting busier. I'd say two things help to mitigate that. One is the amenity of living in Geelong and the ability to get around and the ease of movement to an extent, particularly as a bike rider, as opposed to sort of a vehicle operator. I find that to be incredibly convenient in terms of being able to balance the diary and get around. But the other thing I'd say is Urbis has been incredibly understanding of the importance of being involved in these positions where you are hopefully guiding some of that thought leadership. It's not sure it's good for clients if some of these things happen and you've got a Geelong area that's growing and therefore things are happening, but we're in the business of shaping cities and communities, and I think the things that we're trying to do for clients, or in the delivery of the transport strategy for the region or the tourism strategy for the region, for instance, are really well aligned for what makes for a good Geelong in future. So it's good to be able to be involved with the likes of G21 or particularly and/or Committee for Geelong and those institutions, because you interviewed Jen this morning as an example. My perception is most of those thought leaders or people of interest in Geelong are rowing in the same direction, and there's a lot of complementary elements to the way that we're thinking about the future of Geelong.
And the best thing is you're involved, not standing on the outside whinging and throwing rocks. You're there. You're trying to change things and move things, and that's really, really important too.
Yeah, I think so too. And look, I'm really energised by that group of people, and it's a broad church in terms of who I would say are sort of in that field of wanting to shape the region's future. No, I love it. It's
fantastic.
Love coming to work and love being involved in those.
I'm sorry, I'm just looking out the window at his bike. All right, big black bike. It's not a racing bike, is it? No, it's not. It's a hybrid of some description.
Yeah, it's I get a bit of stick from our staff. Every one of these guys out here rides to work. We're 100% bike riders. That's very good. Probably be rare for Geelong. But I get to put mine out the front of the office where everyone else is parked out the back. So that's the singular perk as a director in the business.
So Nat, I don't think we need to do this, but we'll ask it. If people want to get in touch with you through the Urbis website?
Yes, of course. Yeah, you can come and see us. You can physically walk through the door. We're at 8 James Street. urbis.com.au is the webpage, and you can find my details online through that way.
So thank you very much. I always enjoy talking with you, and that was brilliant.
Yeah, thank you, Nat. It's been great. And Mark, just another great guest on our continuing podcast journey.
So thank you,
Nat.
Thank you, Bert.